Welcome, everyone. We are here today with another episode of Startup Stories, a chance to hear from founders in their own voice about the founding of their company, what comes next, and maybe a few secrets that you don't know about just searching on the internet. My name is Emily, and I'm representing Google Cloud as we talk with these brave women and men who've taken that step into the unknown and find out what the secret sauce is behind that decision. Today we're here with Alan Mosca, who is the co-founder and CTO of Nplan. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, great to have you here. Wish we were in a studio together, but unfortunately we're just both in our home studios here. So why don't you give us that elevator pitch for Nplan, and then we'll dig into some of the details about how it came about and yourself as a founder.
Yeah. So Nplan forecasts the outcomes of construction, infrastructure, and engineering projects to show the risks of overrunning in time and showing ways how to mitigate those risks and prevent some of the well-known delays and overspends that we have seen on mega projects worldwide.
Yeah, sounds like a very important area to tackle. And why don't you then just jump in and give us a little bit of background about yourself and your path to becoming a founder?
Yeah, so my background is one of those zigzagged backgrounds that you often see in founders, and it's very chaotic. But so I was born and grew up in Italy. I did computer engineering and then moved to the UK in 2006. I worked in technology, in system administration, then moved into software engineering, distributed systems, worked for a while in finance, in high-speed trading. Then while I was doing that, I did a master's part-time in computer science that then transitioned into becoming my PhD in machine learning. And at the end of all of this, I realized that I wanted to do something that was closer to the physical world. I wanted to own way more of the risk, and I wanted to take some of the risk, and decided to join an incubator called Entrepreneur First, where they select people before they have an idea, before they have a team, and put them together.
Okay. Well, I definitely want to dig in a little bit around the idea behind Entrepreneur First, but maybe what was your PhD research on? I'm always interested on what people devote such a long time in their life to.
Yeah. So my research was on machine learning theory, particularly in ensemble theory, which is how do you take lots of different machine learning models, train them in different ways, and aggregate them. And it's about developing strategies that maximize the results of doing that. And it's a little bit abstracted from the direct application.
Are you able to apply any of that at Nplan today, or?
Yes, in a very indirect way. Some of my research is closely related to how to estimate the uncertainty of models. So one of the things that we care about at Nplan is the uncertainty, and not just making a prediction, but making a probabilistic forecast. And having families of models helps you reach those sort of corners of wide distributions and wide forecasts.
Oh, well, glad to hear that was time well spent, and you can apply that in your daily life. I think for a lot of folks that's not the case, but
yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think these atypical paths into founding or into tech are the most interesting, and you probably are able to then not only apply your PhD thesis, but all these other areas, maybe from high finance, when you did your funding rounds, that was probably a bonus. Would you say so? Yeah.
I think it helped to have a deep technical background because of what we were doing, but I wouldn't say that it's universally true. I think there are lots of very well-known founders that don't have deep technical backgrounds or went into further education. And in fact, some famous founders are notoriously dropouts, and I think a lot of it is about having an internal curiosity that is independent of the formal education.
Yeah, and so actually that brings us back to this entrepreneur first idea. Can you explain a little bit more how this group works and what it brought for you?
Yeah, Entrepreneur First, they're pretty big now. They have lots of cohorts running simultaneously around the world. But the idea is roughly the same for each of these cohorts, where they select a number of individuals who may have technical backgrounds or may have deep domain backgrounds, so someone who knows very well about a specific domain. And they select them pre-idea, pre-team, and they just effectively chuck everybody into a room and metaphorically turn up the heat, so that teams self-assemble and ideas come out, and it's not at all directed by the incubator. And I came in not knowing what I was going to do. And I think my co-founder came in with like some insights about a specific domain, but he also had no idea what was going to come out of it. And actually, those who came in with some ideas of I'm going to do X usually end up doing something completely different. And I've seen this a couple of times also with friends that I've seen go into Entrepreneur First after me. But it's very interesting because after the first couple of months, the teams that have assembled go through a investment committee to get an initial investment from Entrepreneur First. And then after another couple of months, there is a demo day, which is, some people will be familiar with what Y Combinator do. It's a very similar style presentation with lots of investors and lots of VCs in the room, where you each get a slot to talk about your startup and the traction that you've got in the last 6 months. The whole program lasts 6 months.
So you came in with barely any preconceived notions, and anything you did have was whisked away by boot camp style of design thinking. And how did it really work to ideate and connect you all?
Yeah, it's very focused on mentoring, and the idea is that after the first week where they explain how the rules of the incubator work, you're sort of left to explore ideas and explore team forming and team separation, because there's also a very big opportunity cost of forming into the wrong team for both individuals. They provide a lot of coaching and mentoring. We had a called a venture partner. We had a VP that is now my personal mentor, Tim Davey, who was the co-founder of One Fine Stay, who guided us along the journey and helped us figure out what are the good signals, what are the bad signals.
It sounds great. Sounds like something everybody could benefit from. And through that, then you were paired up with Dev. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you two came together and the idea behind Nplan.
Yeah, so Dev and I met for the first time at an event at, I want to say, the Telegraph, I think. So Entrepreneur First organized lots of outside events, and these outside events were with the entire cohort to go and see maybe a panel of previous founders or something like that. There was this event at, I think it was the Telegraph. It was definitely a newspaper in London. And we met there and started chatting about some potential ideas, and we decided to try working together. And it was very open-ended. This was actually 1 week before the official start of the cohort, and we said, let's see if we can come up with some ideas. So we met again after the event, chatted for a few hours about potential situations, about our own backgrounds as well. Dev knew a lot about project management in capital deployment. So his background, he worked at Shell for a very long while, then was seconded into the government, and he knew about how mega projects were built And the fundamental problem that we wanted to solve is that mega projects and large projects in general tend to be very late and over budget, and we have some wonderful examples wherever we go of projects that are notoriously delayed and over budget in the news. And I shall not name and shame any, but everybody can think about their own examples.
I mean, I would throw the Berlin Brandenburg Airport in there, since I was just up there recently. Finally.
Yeah, we actually, it's finally opened. We used the Brandenburg Airport as one of the examples in our pitch, in our original pitch at Demo Day.
If only we had you there.
Yes, well, sadly, we were too late for that. But, in London we have Crossrail, which is, I'm sure nobody will be offended if I tell them it's late. Because it was supposed to open at some point in 2018, 2019, originally. And the insight was that actually this is a learnable problem, because we know what the original plan is. We know how things get executed. There is data that connects the two. There is a whole chronological plan. Effectively, when a project is planned, we build a Gantt chart of what are we going to do and when. And that Gantt chart has then recordings against it of what happened and when. And we can build a learnable data set that can be used to train models to tell us what are the things that have the highest risk of slipping. And how can these things then affect the end result of the project? So it's a dual problem. It's a problem of complexity. These projects are so big and there are so many activities going on even at the same time that for any single person to think about risk and to think about what are the effects of anything going potentially a tiny bit wrong, it is intractable for a human. And for us, it became the focus of the first 2 years of the company was, can we learn really how to project these things forward in time?
Now, coming from the IT segment, where I think, we say about 80% of all IT projects fail, and then there we're talking not even about these huge investments and manpower needed for construction projects. So we've come a long way from the perfect triangle of scope, budget, and time. So when did you realize that you were ready to, step into the real world with such an idea?
So we started very early with collecting potential customers. So one of the things that was stressed upon us very early by both our VP and Entrepreneur First in general, and also other founders that we had met along the journey, was that one of the things that matters the most is traction. So whilst it's sort of, Reid Hoffman uses this analogy very well of building the plane while you're on the way down, where whilst we're actually building the technology, we're also trying to gather traction, also because we need to find someone that will give us the data. So it was very much, I would say even three-sided problem, where on one end we're going out and saying, like, hey, look, like, we're running an experiment, we're trying to see if this works. Will you invest your data? Obviously, no, we weren't asking for money at that point. And then in return for a company giving us their data, we would guarantee them a seat at the table when the product is ready. So they would be first to have access to the product, and obviously with discounts, etc., as a reward for having basically enabled us to even build it in the first place. There's that side, and then obviously there's the side of building a product, building a machine learning engine that can forecast everything accurately. There's the fundraising aspect, because between the two of us, it becomes really hard to just manage all these things at the same time, and we definitely needed more people power to build the plane. And at the beginning, you have very short runways, right? EF's investment at the time was £80,000, which doesn't get you very far, even if you start hiring one person. And to be able to raise a seed round, you actually need some commitment somewhere from clients to say, "Hey, I'm giving you the data, and I do want to use the product when it's ready."
Sounds like a win-win for them, definitely. But yeah, getting those first data scientists on board and starting to actually build the model, that's the where the rubber hits the road, as we say in the US.
Yes.
Yeah. How was that actually hiring, finding that talent, starting to iterate on the product actually behind the idea?
So iterating the product is something that is always, I think actually both hiring and iterating the product are things that are very, very hard, because I'd say every 6 to 12 months we discover something new that we did not know about our users, about our customers. That means that we go through this, call it an existential event, where we have to adapt and change some of the things we're doing to effectively deliver even more value, right? Because what we were doing before wasn't completely invaluable, and the world hasn't changed, that we discovered something new, which means that to do the next step, we have to turn things around very quickly, and sometimes even by 90 degrees almost. So that is always hard. Hiring is always very difficult for a couple of reasons. One is it's really hard to find people that are both technically very competent and have the appetite to be in a startup at such an early stage. So typical things about a startup are that, first of all, you don't know if you're going to be around in 6 months. You don't know what you're going to be working on tomorrow. And most of the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis are not the things that you prepared for in school and in your training. And so it requires also a mindset of being able to work while everything is on fire.
How are you handling all of this? How do you feel equipped to pivot so quickly and deal with this pressure that comes with being a co-founder?
So there is something that is talked about a lot in founder circles and also in many other circles, but it's imposter syndrome. And I think the answer is I've learned to live with it. I think when I see all other founders, and there are lots of different support groups now. I call them support groups. There's like lots of different programs. There's Tech Nation in the UK has a huge number of these programs that bring together lots of different startups to help the founders and their teams grow, so that they're better equipped to handle what's coming. But in reality, when you then look at your peers, you're like, well, actually, I don't know if I feel like am I doing the same things? These guys seem incredibly smart and way more talented than me, and it seems like they were born to do this. Whereas, it feels like I'm improvising on as I'm going along. And then you have these groups, and when you scratch under the surface, everybody feels the same way, which is a little bit reassuring. We're all definitely making it up as we go along. There are very few exceptions. So the founders that have done it 3 times before, maybe they're not improvising as much anymore. But in general, if a lot of us feel like we're making it up as we go along, which means that you feel like you're always a couple of steps behind where you should be, and you're working very hard because you have to be about 4 steps ahead of what the rest of the company's doing, which makes it very conflicted and very hard, but also very rewarding, right? It's not just challenging, it's not just hard, it's also very satisfying to see things work out when they do.
Yeah, well, then you need to have a great team on board with you, and I'm sure that they feel like you are those 4 steps ahead. So tell us a little bit about how you've built your team at Nplan and the culture that you've established.
Yeah. So we were very deliberate about culture. We started in the first year or so. We started discussing what is our culture, what is our way of working. Before we got to 10 people, we had a culture deck that said, "This is who we are. These are the things that we believe in, and this is how we work with each other." And we made sure that it was a reflective culture deck. A lot of culture decks, like they'll end up being a mishmash of hundreds of different values, and they become incredibly long because they are aspirational and they talk about like this is what we want to be and these are the things that we think are nice. We made sure that we only spoke about the things that we know were currently true about our team at the time. And then we built on top of that. And as things evolved and as things got expanded, as things expanded from where we were, then we added those to our culture. But it was important for us that the culture deck and everything that we say about culture is reflective of who we are and not who we want to be. Because you could want to be anyone, right? I could say I want to fly, but, you know, I
Yeah.
don't have wings.
Could have a lot of buzzwords in there. Your
Yes,
aspirational
right,
deck.
which
Yeah.
which which makes it very attractive in some cases, but very hard to believe, right? And so we want it to be genuine. Also because if we're going to use this to attract people, we want to attract people that we want to work with. So there's no point in putting something out there that isn't true because these will be people that we don't want to work with in the end.
Yeah, I have a quote from you here that you said, I didn't know what problem I was going to solve or what product I was going to build, but I knew what kind of culture my startup was going to have.
Yes, yes. And both me and my co-founder have found ourselves in cultures that are very, very different from the ones that where we would feel comfortable. And in some cases, you know, we worked in very good cultures. So we saw both what was good and what was bad from a cultural perspective, and what made people feel accepted and what made them, what stimulated them to be much more productive and much more fulfilled. And we wanted to recreate some of the good things that we saw, and we want to make sure that we avoided some of the bad things that we saw. And this is something that we knew, we could pivot as much as we want. We could end up, I don't know, making batteries for electric cars for all I knew after 2 years, which is actually a highly competitive market. So I'm happy that we're not in that market right now. But we could have ended up doing anything, but we knew that the culture would have to stay the same. And so we were very, very focused on making sure that we got that right.
So, Alan, what would you say is the core pillar then of your culture that you've really established?
So we built our culture around three main values, which are, we call radical truthfulness, learning from everything, and aim high, rhyme fast. And they each have like very long descriptions, but I think the one that is central, and the three values feed each other, but the one that is central for us is radical truthfulness, which is a mix of a couple of things that we picked up along the way. And this was very interesting because we didn't know what to call it in the beginning. And so it changed name a lot of times. It was like transparency, honesty, duty to speak up, all of these things. And then we landed on a couple of frameworks that we found very interesting. One was Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And that was one of the defining moments where we realized that actually there are other people that think the way we do, of it doesn't matter who you are in the company. If you have something to say, you need to say it. You have a duty to challenge things. And you also have a duty to care about your peers, which is actually a very important component, right? So all of this is very strongly based upon listening rather than interrupting each other, for example. And then we found Ray Dalio's principles, and we adopted some of the ideas from there. Some of Ray Dalio's principles are a little bit extreme, so we didn't take everything, of course. And so we selected a bit of what we wanted, but the core idea is that nothing is hidden apart from private personal information, which, things that would be covered by GDPR anyway. So anyone can come to any meeting as an observer, and anyone has the duty to say something if they disagree with what is going on, as long as the disagreement is never personal and it's always objective about what is going on. So I think this is the wrong idea is something that we encourage people to say. I think you have this problem is not, right?
Situation first.
Yes.
And what was the hardest feedback that you've gotten through this process? Were you challenged at any point?
I get challenged almost every day. We actually did a session with our senior leadership team this week. So on Monday night, we all met up and had dinner in the office and gave feedback to each other. We just spent the whole evening giving feedback to each other. So I've been writing things down. I have like a 2-page of feedback that I've received from people that I'm going to start working on. Dev is my co-founder. Dev and I spent a lot of time collecting feedback along the way. We do a yearly survey of the whole company. How do they see us? What do they think about us? What would they like us to do differently? I encourage everyone in the company to challenge me during one-on-ones, and I sometimes just appear in meetings and say like, "Hey guys, what's going on here?" And so it is very reciprocal. It is very reciprocal.
Ah, good to hear. Yeah, I think these yearly check-ins and encouraging people to challenge the status quo. I mean, maybe it comes naturally in a startup because people are understanding that you're building the plane as you're flying it, hopefully flying it up, like you said. But yeah, it's hard even once you get that first product out, that's a baby. People put a lot of effort in there, and then to make significant changes, can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it becomes impossible to not care about what you're doing, because the moment you stop caring about what you're doing, it means that you stop challenging, and it becomes immediately evident.
So looking at hiring, it sounds like you are growing now, and you have a talent acquisition manager that joined. How did that role come about for you as a priority?
So one of the things that we realized is that, first of all, we were going to grow very fast, right? We raised our Series A just under a year ago. I think it's literally 51 weeks ago, with some great investors. GV is one of them, and we realized that we were going to grow very quickly. We realized that there is a lot of effort that we would need to go through to find those people that I described earlier, who are both very competent and want to be in a very chaotic and noisy and undetermined and uncertain environment, and would thrive from it. And it's something that, I sometimes go and see if I can find someone through my network, but it's something that we realize that we would need someone to effectively do reach out and see who is looking for a job right now. We found that traditional recruiters are very good if you're trying to fill a very well-defined role and in an established company. That is great, because then you have like a very specific job description and you follow a very, very static process. People apply to that job. They know what they're applying for. They've done it before. It's something that is very well defined. And that's where recruiters work best, I think. We're still at the size where we want people that are going to be very flexible, because actually, this is something that we're discussing now. We're changing the structure of some teams, and it's all a little bit up in the air. And this happens regularly, by the way. It's not something special about now, where we're sort of always, again, we're always improvising, and so someone who is very comfortable in a dynamic environment like that is very hard to find and requires a lot of effort.
Yeah, it's really like a muscle. So we see this a lot at Google as well. We're moving quickly, and the more you practice it, the easier it is to adjust and to let things go. But yeah, it's definitely not done enough in a lot of companies. So maybe something for Entrepreneur First, that they take some cohorts of next gen startup team members.
Yeah, actually, like Entrepreneur First have spent a lot of effort trying to help their startups recruit. So they have, and this is something that not just Entrepreneur First, but a lot of investors do. They have lists of people that were in other startups in the portfolio that are now looking for a job. And so there's like these candidate pools where you can go and look for someone if you know what you're looking for. And every once in a while, there'll be CVs that get forwarded onto portfolio groups, or on the EF Slack channels as well. Sometimes like, oh, this person is amazing. It's a friend of mine. They're looking for a job in a startup. Does anybody need someone to do something like this?
Also sounds like it could maybe lead to kind of a closed group eventually. How are you handling diversity in your hiring?
Yeah, I think I think diversity is in tech startups, or in tech companies in general, actually, a very hard topic to discuss. I'm glad that everybody's talking about it now. One of the things that we thought about very early on is that diversity has to come at the top of the recruitment funnel, and so we try very hard to attract as many people from different backgrounds, not just traditional diversity. Obviously, there's the obvious gender diversity, but different backgrounds, different education, different cultures. And the way we encourage that is actually by making the company an inclusive place. So despite having, on the face of it, and this is something that is very often misunderstood with cultures that are loosely based around radical candor, is that, but doesn't that mean that everybody spends all their time bickering? And it's absolutely not true, because the most important dimension actually is caring about each other. And so we try and get that to transpire all across the interview process. We treat candidates as if they're already employees when we're dealing with them. And so we have the same level of personal caring, but also what do we owe them in terms of, how quickly do we get back to them? How understanding are we with special circumstances? How much do we try and facilitate them coming to the interview? All these things, so that they don't have additional, call it mental burdens. This is one of the things that is very important. Is also mental health, which has started to come up. All these lockdowns have had an effect on mental health, but mental health is very, very important, not just for people that are in delicate situations, but just anyone, right? And it's very important that we take care of each other, and so we try to put that as forward as possible in everything that we do with candidates and recruitment.
Yeah, I think that definitely helps. Inclusiveness is if people are building this resilience and this, knowing that your team is behind you. That's a critical component. At Google, we're calling that psychological safety. Knowing that you can make a mistake also, which helps with, challenging your boss, challenging the co-founder, and having a safe place to work.
Yeah, psychological safety is actually one of the most important things, where it's never about blame, and we actually deliberately call out blame as one of the enemies of our culture. So I encourage anyone in the company to call out when blame is being thrown around. I do it myself. I say, guys, this sounds a little bit blamey. Let's stop doing this. Let's focus on the problem at hand. And it's something that it's actually very natural, right? If you think outside of work, it's actually very natural for people to think about like, oh, it's this person's fault, that person's fault. And it's very hard to do consciously remove blame from the equation when you're in a work situation. And so helping each other by calling each other out, like, oh, this is not good, then that really helps.
Yeah, making it visible, practicing it over time. So in looking in the future, then, how do you envision Nplan, say, 5 years from now, or what is your future hope for the company?
So I hope we continue to grow the way we're growing. I hope that we're preserving the culture. That's one of the things that I'm most concerned about with fast growth, right? Growing fast means that you risk diluting the culture, and I don't want that to happen. And then we're actually way closer to fulfilling our vision and our mission. So we started with this vision that we want to live in a world where the ambition of human projects is not limited by risk, which is very broad and very high level, to the point that it doesn't mean that we have to operate in infrastructure, engineering, and construction anymore. It could be IT projects as well. And my comment there is that if there was the right data, we probably would have tried from IT as well from the beginning. And we're working closer to that. We have a mission of enabling $1 trillion of new project value. So what I would hope is that by then we'll have stories of, oh, I wouldn't have built this if I wasn't able to measure and prevent the risk. For me, this would be a great indicator of success, especially for things that have strong second and third order effects. So, I think it's not, our primary mission is not to help construction companies have better margins, but it's what does the world look like if we can build, if we can build more hospitals, if we can build space sports and hyperloops and things like that, or even if we can build enough data centers at pace, right? What does the internet look like if we can build more data centers, better data centers, right? So there's also environmental impact, because anything that you build that is new is going to hopefully be better than what's already existing. The other one is, right now nuclear power stations have the biggest blocker to building nuclear power stations is the risk and the capital and the timelines. And so you have to put so much down on the line to build one, but building nuclear power stations takes so much coal off the grid that it's crazy. And so even though renewables are definitely the longer term solution.
Well, I love that you mentioned the environmental footprint and sustainability, because I could envision, ambitious human projects should be taking on these challenges for the future. So the construction industry, I believe, is also a super contributor to global warming. So it might be an extension of your risk assessment as how to reduce the carbon footprint as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Wherever there is waste and overruns and going over budget, that means that people are working without a predetermined plan, which also means that things like safety, actually, safety and the environment take a second place to let's try to finish this as fast and as within budget as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we need to find a good common ground, because obviously those should be the two top priorities. And if the data leads you to promoting safety and a more environmentally responsible decision. That's the best. It's transparent decision making within a project. So now we get into the fun part, the Area 120 secret stuff. So Alan, what can you tell us about Nplan and yourself as a founder that no one will find on the internet?
Yeah, this is very interesting. We present a very serious external branding because we have to talk about risk. We talk about very high impact consequences of getting things wrong. But actually, internally, we're a very playful company. Just a few weeks ago, we had to talk about some clarifications and changes to our product strategy, and we did this in a whole company meeting where we had slides and we talked about like these are the changes. And within 5 minutes of that happening, we have this channel, which is actually the most active channel on our Slack, with all sorts of different memes that we make about each other. And within 5 minutes of us finishing that meeting, a meme appeared that summarized the strategy way better than any of us could have in any other form. And it was very funny. And now when we refer to the product strategy, everybody thinks about the meme, and it's almost as if the product strategy now is the meme.
Well, that's perfect. I mean, whoever can turn your product strategy into something as succinct and memorable as a meme, that's a big win. Give them a promotion. Cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing something behind the scenes and for taking us through that whole tour of the founding of Nplan and how you vision it for the future. I'm really excited to follow you, and I welcome all the audience to do so as well. Let's see what Nplan can accomplish, and maybe we'll have those spaceports sooner than we think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't wait to be able to travel to Mars.
Mars is our next destination for the podcast.
Excellent.
Sounds like a plan. Well, it was great to have you here today, Alan. Wishing you all the best, and looking forward to the next time we can talk.
Me too. Thanks so much, Emily, for having me on the show. This was a lot of fun.
Great. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to this episode of Startup Stories. Check out online Google for Startups, where we have more information about the resources available. And follow Nplan to see if that next construction project near you will be completed on time and in budget.